My wife's work husband sent hearts. HR sent the divorce papers. The message that changed everything. Why is another man sending my wife red hearts at midnight? That was the first thought that froze him. The screen glowed in the dark bedroom, his wife's phone buzzing against the nightstand. One glance. Just one. And suddenly his marriage of 11 years no longer felt like home. If you find value in real stories told with clarity and truth, make sure to subscribe to stay informed with Left Woman Loud. He lay there listening to her breathing, steady, calm, innocent. But his own chest felt like a cage tightening around his ribs. The message was short, simple, almost childish. A string of red hearts. From someone saved as Alex. Work. Work. But the kind of work that lingered past office hours. The kind of work that laughed in emojis when he hadn't heard her laugh like that in months. He turned the phone face down. Tried to convince himself it meant nothing. But his mind wouldn't listen. Why did she never smile at me like that anymore? Was it innocent? Or was work husband more than a joke now? The questions burned holes in his sanity. He remembered when she first mentioned Alex. It was over dinner 2 years ago. She laughed when she said it. "Oh, he's just my work husband. You know how offices are. It's a joke." He played along then because he wanted to be easygoing. He trusted her. And he wanted to be the kind of man who didn't get jealous over harmless office banter. But now, staring at the phone, it didn't feel harmless at all. He tried to sleep. Failed. Every blink behind his eyelids replayed that notification. Every heart burned itself deeper into his brain. By morning, his suspicion had shape. By breakfast, it had teeth. She walked into the kitchen hair loose, wearing his old college hoodie. She smiled. Morning. Coffee. And for the first time in years, he didn't see the warmth behind her smile. He saw a mask. "Who's Alex?" he asked casually, his voice too calm to be casual. She froze just a second too long before answering. "My colleague. You know that." Her tone was light, but her hand gripped the coffee pot tighter than necessary. His heart sank. It wasn't her words. It was the way her eyes darted before they landed back on his. Why is she hiding? Or am I imagining it? The HR email. That same day, as if fate were feeding his paranoia, an email appeared in his inbox at work. It was from HR. Subject line: notice of confidential matter. Inside a sterile paragraph: professional, unemotional. But its meaning hit like a storm. Concerns have been raised regarding interactions between employees. Please be advised HR will be reviewing workplace relationships and corresponding policies. Further details forthcoming. He stared at the screen, blood draining from his face. It wasn't addressed to him personally. It was sent to a list of managers. But still, the timing, the message, the implication. Could it be her? Could it be Alex? Could this work husband joke already have spilled into scandal? At home that night, she was quiet. Too quiet. And he felt the walls of their kitchen closing in on him. He wanted to ask her again. He wanted to shout, to accuse, to demand. But instead, he said nothing. Because silence sometimes is the only way to keep the house from burning down. Still, one thought gnawed at him as he watched her wash the dishes, her ring finger glistening under the faucet light. What if the hearts weren't just emojis? What if they were the beginning of the end? What he didn't know was that HR's next step wouldn't just change his wife's career. It would shatter his marriage. The investigation begins. The HR email wasn't meant for him, but it was enough to plant a seed of dread. All day at work, he couldn't focus. Every spreadsheet blurred into questions he didn't want to ask. Every conference call felt like background noise compared to the storm inside his head. He replayed the image, her phone lighting up, red hearts dancing across the screen. Each heart felt like a cut, small but precise. Watching for signs that week, he started noticing little things he'd once ignored. Her phone always face down. The way she smiled at text messages she didn't share. The sudden late meetings that hadn't been part of her schedule before. He asked himself, had these signs always been there, or had his suspicion created them? The worst part was not knowing. A subtle test. One evening he suggested dinner together, just the two of them, no kids, no distractions. She hesitated. "I can't. We've got a big project deadline. I'll be home late." Her excuse was logical, but her voice carried a faint tremor he couldn't unhear. So he tried something bold. Why don't I swing by your office, bring you dinner? Her eyes widened just for a moment before she masked it with a laugh. You don't have to do that. Really? We'll probably just eat in the break room. The answer was casual, too casual, and yet it sounded rehearsed. The surveillance. That night he drove anyway, parked across the street from her building, headlights off, hands trembling on the wheel. The office lights glowed on the 4th floor. He saw shadows moving behind the blinds. One of them looked like her. The other, broad-shouldered, leaning closer than necessary, must have been Alex. His stomach twisted. He wanted to storm inside, demand answers, but instead he sat in silence, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Because the truth was scarier than suspicion. What if he was right? The first crack years earlier, on their 7th anniversary, she had joked at dinner. You spend more time with your laptop than you do with me. He laughed then. But looking back now, he wondered if that was the first crack. The moment she began to drift. And if Alex had simply stepped into the silence he had left behind. The first confrontation. When she got home past midnight, she found him waiting in the living room. The lights were dim, the air heavy. You worked late, he said, his tone sharp but calm. She nodded, setting her bag down. Yeah, it was crazy. I'm exhausted. He studied her face, every twitch, every blink, searching for the truth. Who's Alex to you? The question slipped out like a blade unsheathed. Her lips parted, then closed. She forced a smile. My colleague. I told you. He leaned forward. Colleague don't send hearts at midnight. Her face drained of color. She looked away, fumbled with her bag strap. It was a joke, she whispered. You're reading too much into it. But his heart knew better. The way her voice cracked. The way her eyes didn't meet his. They betrayed her. HR strikes. 2 days later, another email arrived. This time it was directly addressed to her. He saw the notification pop up on their shared tablet before she quickly swiped it away. But not before he caught a glimpse of the subject line, Mandatory Meeting Workplace Conduct Review. His pulse thundered in his ears. That night she avoided his gaze at dinner. Their kids laughed over pasta, oblivious, while silence stretched like a noose between husband and wife. And as he stared at her, one thought crystallized. This wasn't just about marriage anymore. It was about careers, reputations, and truths that could no longer stay buried. What he didn't know was that HR's meeting wasn't the only confrontation waiting for them. Someone else had already decided to make their marriage public business. The HR meeting, secrets exposed. The email came on a Tuesday. Mandatory Meeting Workplace Conduct Review. She tried to act like it was routine, but the way she gripped her coffee mug that morning, knuckles pale, said otherwise. He watched her, saying nothing. The silence between them was louder than any argument. At the office, she sat in a sterile conference room, the blinds half closed, the air conditioning too cold. Across the table, 2 HR managers and her direct supervisor. A manila folder sat on the table, unopened, heavy with accusation. Thank you for coming, Mrs. Carter, one of them began. Professional tone, polite smile. But her stomach churned. They started with questions. Harmless at first. About work culture, about professionalism, about blurred boundaries. But then came the sharper ones. Do you consider your relationship with Alex purely professional? Have you communicated with him outside of work hours in ways that could be considered inappropriate? Her throat tightened. She wanted to say no, to end it there. But her mind replayed the hearts, the late-night chats, the laughter over private jokes. And she knew lying wasn't just dangerous. It was useless. The slippery slope. It had started innocently, sharing memes during boring Zoom calls, jokes about difficult clients, quick texts that spilled over into evenings. She told herself it was harmless, that every office had a work husband. But somewhere along the way, the boundary blurred. The hearts weren't jokes anymore. They were placeholders for feelings she hadn't dared to name. The husband waits. Meanwhile, he sat in his car in the company parking lot. He couldn't help himself. He had followed her here, telling himself it was coincidence, though he knew it wasn't. From behind the windshield, he watched employees come and go. Every shadow behind those glass walls felt like a threat. What is she saying in there? What truth is she hiding that HR will hear before I do? The thought was unbearable. Strangers knowing his marriage more intimately than he did. The reveal inside HR slid a printed sheet across the table. Her phone records. Not every message, just enough to prove a pattern. Strings of emojis, inside jokes, late-night timestamps, and then the one message that made her breath hitch. If only things were different. Alex's words, her silence in reply. It wasn't explicit, but it was enough. "We're not accusing you of misconduct," HR said carefully, "but boundaries must be respected. Given the perception this creates and given that concerns were raised anonymously." Her ears rang. Anonymously, who had reported them? A jealous colleague or, God forbid, her own husband, at home. That evening she came back pale and quiet. He was waiting in the living room again. "How was your meeting?" he asked. Too calm, dangerously calm. She dropped her bag. Standard, just HR being HR. He tilted his head. "I heard rumors fly fast in offices. Anything I should know," her breath caught. Did he know, or was he fishing? She wanted to tell him everything, to confess before the walls caved in, but fear silenced her. Fear of losing her job, fear of losing him. So she smiled thinly. Nothing to worry about, but he knew better. Because later, while she showered, he checked her bag and found the HR notice folded at the bottom. The subject line was clear, the accusations undeniable. His hands shook as he read, and in that moment something inside him broke. What he didn't know was that Alex had already made his own confession, one that HR planned to share. Alex's confession. The truth spills out. Alex didn't look like a man who carried guilt, at least not until HR called him in. He sat across from the same conference table where she had been hours earlier. Only this time there was no polite smile from the managers, no easing into the conversation. They got straight to the point. "Alex, concerns have been raised about your relationship with a colleague. We need your full cooperation." Alex cracks. At first he tried to laugh it off. "Come on, you know how teams are. We're close. It's just banter." But then they showed him the same records. The emojis, the late-night messages, his own words staring back at him in black and white. If only things were different. He swallowed hard. For the first time his voice faltered. She means a lot to me." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Not a declaration. Not an affair. But something raw desire, unspoken, suddenly undeniable. His version. He remembered the first time she stayed late at the office. It was raining outside, the building nearly empty. She had laughed at one of his terrible jokes, leaned her head back, and for a second the fluorescent light caught her face just so. That was the night he realized he wasn't laughing just to pass the time. He was laughing to keep her there. The husband's suspicion. At home, her husband's paranoia had turned into obsession. He began tracking her patterns: when she left, how long she stayed at work, even the tone of her voice when she said Alex's name. Was I blind this whole time? Or am I only now seeing what's been in front of me for years? He remembered the HR notice he'd found in her bag, and he knew Alex was part of this, the missing piece in a puzzle he never asked to solve. A phone call. Late that night his phone buzzed, an unknown number. He almost ignored it until the voicemail came through. A man's voice, shaky, confessional. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I respect her, but I need you to know it wasn't one-sided." Then silence. He replayed it 3 times, his pulse quickening with every word. The voice was unmistakable. Alex. Confrontation at dinner. The next evening he couldn't hold it in. They sat at the table, their children gone to bed, the house cloaked in uneasy quiet. "I got a call last night," he began. She froze mid-bite. From the way her fork clattered against the plate, she already knew. From Alex. Her lips parted, then closed. She tried to compose herself, but her eyes betrayed her. Wide, afraid. "What did he say?" she whispered. "That he respects you," he spat, bitterness sharpening every syllable. That it wasn't one-sided. Her face went pale, and in that moment he realized something worse than betrayal. She wasn't shocked at Alex's confession. She was shocked that he knew. The breaking point. He slammed his fist on the table, the sound echoing through the kitchen. "Tell me the truth. Was it just texts? Or was it more?" Tears filled her eyes. "I never slept with him, I swear." But the pause before her words was too long, too heavy. And suddenly her truth sounded like another lie. He stood pacing, hands in his hair. The walls seemed to close in the air, thick with everything unsaid. "You brought him into our marriage," he growled. "Do you even realize what you've done?" She broke, then sobbing into her hands. Not just from guilt, but from fear. Because she knew something he didn't. Something that HR hadn't told him yet. What he didn't know was that Alex's confession had already been documented, and HR had forwarded it to legal. HR escalates. Legal and divorce loom. The letter arrived in a plain white envelope. No warning. No return address beyond the company logo in the corner. He found it first tucked into the mailbox between grocery flyers and utility bills. His name wasn't on it, but instinct made him open it anyway. Inside was a single sheet. Formal. Cold. "This matter has been escalated to the legal department. Please be advised further review will involve potential conflicts of interest and personal conduct concerns. Cooperation is mandatory. The floor falls out." He read it twice, 3 times before the meaning sank in. Legal. Not HR anymore. Not just office gossip. This wasn't about emojis and late-night texts. This was about liability, reputation, possible termination. And his gut twisted possible exposure outside the company. If legal is involved, then this is bigger than her job. It's about us. His father's words. He remembered something his father had once said during his own messy divorce. Once lawyers get involved, it's no longer about the truth. It's about survival. At the time, he dismissed it as bitterness. Now it echoed like prophecy. The dinner that broke them. That evening, he confronted her with the letter. She froze when she saw it in his hand, her face drained of color. "You opened my mail," she whispered, though her voice carried no anger, only resignation. "I shouldn't have had to," he shot back. "You should have told me." Her lips trembled. "I was going to. I didn't know how. Didn't know how." His voice cracked, raw and rising. "You let HR and legal know more about our marriage than I do." Her defense tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't cheat on you," she pleaded. "It was stupid. Flirty texts, nothing more. I never crossed the line." But in his mind, the line had already been crossed. Not in bed, but in trust. He wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to. But the voicemail from Alex haunted him. The emojis, the hearts, the way she smiled at her phone but never at him. The children. Their kids wandered into the kitchen, then asking for dessert. 2 little faces, innocent, oblivious. He forced a smile, handed them ice cream, all while his heart split inside. How do you tell children their mother's job might end their parents' marriage? The lawyer's call. The next day, his phone rang. This time it wasn't HR. It was a lawyer from the company's compliance department. "We're conducting a review," the voice said, clipped and professional. "As her spouse, you may be contacted for context. We want to confirm whether you were aware of any ongoing issues at home that might reflect workplace conflicts." His blood went cold. At home. At work. There was no separation anymore. They were pulling him in whether he liked it or not. The anniversary gift. He thought back to the necklace he'd given her on their 10th anniversary. Delicate gold with a single sapphire. She had smiled, kissed him, whispered, "I love you." But now he wondered, had she meant it? Or had she already been slipping away hearts sent across screens to someone else? Breaking point. That night, he told her everything. About the voicemail, about the letter, about the lawyer's call. She crumpled into the couch, her face buried in her hands. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I just wanted to feel seen." And then it went too far. He stared at her, torn between rage and heartbreak. "I don't care if you didn't sleep with him. You gave him a part of you that was mine. The papers." 3 days later, a knock came at the door. A courier. A manila envelope. Inside, divorce papers. Filed under his name. Stamped by her company's legal department, citing conflict of interest and irreparable breach of trust. He hadn't filed them. She hadn't told him. But HR had forced it. The company had chosen to protect itself by tearing their marriage apart on paper. What neither of them knew was that Alex wasn't finished. He was about to make a choice that would explode everything further. Alex's move. When work crosses the line, Alex couldn't sleep. Not after the HR meetings, not after the legal department's questions. He felt cornered, stripped bare, and in his panic he convinced himself of one thing. If she won't fight for us, then I will. The email at 2 a.m. under the haze of desperation he typed. Line after line spilled from his trembling fingers. I don't care what they say. I don't care what they think. I meant every word, every heart. If your husband doesn't see you, I do. If he doesn't fight for you, I will. He hit send. Not just to her personal account, but to her company email. The one monitored. The one HR already had access to. The wife's shock. The next morning, she opened her inbox at her desk and nearly choked on her coffee. The subject line screamed at her, I choose you. Her stomach dropped. Every line was a nail in her career's coffin, and her marriage's too. She darted glances around the office, terrified someone had seen it already. But she knew HR would. They always did. Why she let it happen. She thought back to the months before Alex, the lonely dinners, the endless nights her husband worked late, coming home too tired to talk, the way she felt invisible like a ghost haunting her own house. Alex had been a light in that void, a laugh when she'd forgotten how to laugh. But now that light burned like wildfire, threatening to consume everything. The husband finds out. That night she came home pale, trembling. She didn't speak during dinner, didn't meet his eyes. When the kids went upstairs, he pressed. What happened now? She hesitated, then handed him her phone. The email glared back at him, every word dripping with betrayal. His hands shook as he scrolled. By the last line, his vision blurred with rage. He sent this to your work account. She nodded weakly. I didn't ask for it. I didn't know he'd. But her excuses dissolved under the weight of the truth. Alex wasn't just a shadow anymore. He was a fire. The husband's spiral. He stormed into the garage, fists slamming the steering wheel of his parked car. His thoughts spiraled images of Alex laughing with her, touching her arm, imagining her smiling back. Was it really only texts? Or had she given him more than she admitted? The rage twisted into something darker. Not just jealousy, not just betrayal, but humiliation. Because now it wasn't private. It was public. Their marriage had become office gossip, company liability, and he, her husband, looked like a fool. Her fear. Upstairs, she clutched her pillow, her chest tight. The walls felt like they were closing in. If HR saw the email, she could lose her job. If her husband saw her guilt, she could lose her family. And she knew sooner or later she would lose both. The warning. The next day, HR called her in again. This time, there was no polite preamble. We've reviewed new correspondence. Given the escalation, we'll be recommending immediate separation of parties. For your protection and his. Her blood ran cold. For your protection. The words felt like a sentence, because protection didn't just mean career fallout. It meant Alex had crossed a line. What she didn't know was that Alex wasn't planning to back down. He was planning to show up at their home. The home invasion. Alex at the door. It was a Friday night when the knock came. Loud, insistent. Not the polite tap of a neighbor, but the pounding of someone who believed he had the right to be let in. The husband froze mid-step. The kids were upstairs, cartoons humming faintly from their room. His wife was in the kitchen washing dishes, her face pale the moment the sound hit. Don't, she whispered, voice trembling. Don't open it. But he already knew who it was, the face at the door. He pulled it open and there stood Alex. Disheveled shirt, eyes bloodshot, a bouquet of flowers crumpled in his hand like he'd grabbed them on impulse. Where is she? Alex demanded, scanning past him. I just need to talk to her. The husband's jaw clenched. You need to leave, now. But Alex stepped forward, 1 foot across the threshold. She deserves to hear me. Without you twisting it. Without HR breathing down our necks. The wife appears. Her voice cracked from the hallway. Alex, stop. Please. He turned, his face softening at the sight of her. There you are, he breathed, almost tender. I told you I'd fight for us. The husband's fists curled. For us. The words sliced deeper than any text message ever could. The breaking point. He shoved Alex back onto the porch. You're not part of this family. You never will be. But Alex didn't flinch. Instead, he laughed bitterly. Family. She hasn't felt like family with you in years. You don't see her. You don't hear her. I do. The wife covered her face, tears spilling through her fingers. Because every word, though reckless, carried a truth she hadn't dared say aloud. Her loneliness. She remembered the nights her husband sat glued to his laptop deadlines, stretching until dawn. The dinners eaten cold. The conversations that dried into silence. She hadn't wanted Alex, but she had wanted someone. And Alex had been there when her husband wasn't. The children hear footsteps on the stairs. Two small faces peering down wide-eyed, sensing the storm. Mommy, Daddy, what's happening? The husband swallowed hard, his rage cracking into panic. This wasn't just between adults anymore. The children were witnesses. And once innocence is cracked, it can never be restored. The ultimatum. Alex, wild-eyed, raised the flowers like a shield. She doesn't belong in this prison you built. She belongs with someone who actually loves her. The husband stepped forward, his voice low, lethal. If you don't leave this porch in 5 seconds, I'll make sure you regret it. The wife screamed his name, begging them both to stop. Her hands shook, torn between two men, one her husband, one her mistake. The collapse. Finally, Alex dropped the flowers. They scattered across the steps, petals torn beneath his shoes. But before he turned to leave, he looked at her one last time. "You know I'm right," he whispered. Then he walked into the night. The door slammed shut, silence stretched, broken only by her sobs. The husband stared at her, chest heaving. "You invited him into our lives," he said, voice hoarse. "And now he thinks he has a claim to you." She shook her head violently. "I never wanted this. I never wanted him." But her words rang hollow even to her own ears. The fracture. Upstairs, the children cried quietly, clutching each other. Downstairs, a marriage cracked like glass underfoot. And in that moment, he realized this wasn't just about HR or legal or Alex. This was about the trust they had buried years ago. What he didn't know was that HR already had footage, security camera clips of Alex waiting outside her office, lingering, touching her arm too long. Evidence that would tip the scales once and for all. The evidence, truth that can't be denied. The email arrived on Monday morning. Subject line, final review, evidence enclosed. She opened it at the kitchen counter, her hands trembling around her coffee mug. Her husband watched her face pale, watched her lips part without sound. When she finally slid the laptop toward him, he braced himself, but nothing could prepare him for what he saw. The footage, grainy security camera clips filled the screen. The office lobby at night. Alex waiting by the elevators, flowers in hand. Alex leaning too close at her desk, brushing her arm. Alex walking her to her car, his hand lingering just a second too long on her back. It wasn't explicit. It wasn't damning in a legal sense. But it was enough. Enough to kill denial. Enough to crush trust. His world tilts. The husband's chest tightened as the clips played on loop. Every second felt like betrayal crystallized. "You let it get this far," he whispered. "Even if you didn't touch him, you let him believe he could." She covered her face, sobbing into her palms. "I was lonely," she choked out. "I was invisible in this house. And he noticed me." Her words pierced deeper than the footage, because somewhere buried under rage he knew they were true. The distance. He remembered the months leading up to this. Nights he worked late chasing promotions. Mornings he left early chasing deadlines. Conversations reduced to logistics, groceries, bills, kids' schedules. Somewhere along the way he had stopped asking how she was, stopped noticing the way her laughter faded, and Alex had stepped into the silence he left behind. The HR verdict. Later that week, HR called them both in separately. Her verdict was swift, given the perception of impropriety, and in light of the evidence, your employment with the company is terminated, effective immediately. Her world collapsed in a single sentence. Not just a job, her career, her reputation. She walked out with a cardboard box of belongings, head-bowed coworkers whispering as she passed. The husband's shame. At home, he watched her unpack the box onto the dining table, family photos, trinkets, awards. The kids asked why Mommy was home early. She smiled through tears, but he could see the shame etched into her every movement. And beneath his anger, shame consumed him too, because HR had acted as judge and jury over their marriage, and he had let strangers see the cracks before he acknowledged them himself. The confrontation. That night they sat in the dimly lit living room, the silence heavier than words. Finally, he broke it. Was it worth it? His voice shook, equal parts fury and grief. Losing your job, almost losing your kids. losing us. She looked at him, eyes swollen, voice raw. I never wanted him. I wanted you. But you were gone even when you were here. Her confession hung between them, bitter and true. The choice. For the first time, he didn't shout back, didn't accuse, didn't even move. Because in that moment, he realized the question wasn't about Alex anymore. It wasn't about HR or legal or workplace policies. It was about whether two broken people could find their way back after cutting each other so deeply. What neither of them knew was that the divorce papers HR had drafted weren't binding, but the next step was in his hands. Would he sign them or tear them apart? The decision, forgiveness or final goodbye? The divorce papers sat on the dining table. A silent threat, a promise of endings. He stared at them for hours, pen in hand. One signature could erase 11 years. One flourish of ink could redraw their children's future. But his hand refused to move. The children's question. That evening, their daughter crept downstairs, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Daddy, are you and Mommy breaking? She whispered. The word breaking split him open. Not breaking up, not divorcing, breaking. He pulled her close, kissed her hair, but couldn't answer. Because the truth was too heavy for her small shoulders. The wife's plea. Later, when the kids were asleep, she stood across from him, her face pale but steady. If you want to sign them, she said softly, I won't stop you. I deserve it. Her voice cracked, but she didn't look away. I made mistakes. I let someone else fill the silence you left, but I never stopped loving you. Not for a second. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't want Alex. I don't want anyone else. I want us. If there's still an us left. The photograph. He thought of the framed photo on the mantel their wedding day. Her smile radiant. His arm wrapped around her, young and certain. That man believed in forever. This man wasn't so sure. His turmoil. Inside his thoughts collided. She betrayed me, but I abandoned her first. She chose attention elsewhere, but I gave her nothing to hold on to. Trust was shattered, yes, but love was still there, raw and battered, begging for air. The choice. He picked up the pen. She held her breath. Then slowly, deliberately, he set it down. Not on the signature line, but across the papers, drawing a single slash that rendered them void. Her sob broke the silence. A sob of relief, of grief, of something in between. The quiet after he reached for her hand. It was cold, trembling, but she didn't pull away. They sat there in the dim light, two broken people holding on, not knowing what tomorrow would bring. Forgiveness wouldn't be quick. Trust wouldn't return overnight. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't over yet. Weeks later, he found the flowers Alex had dropped still crushed on the porch petals, dried to dust. He swept them away without a word. Because whatever happened next, Alex was no longer part of their story. This was theirs to rebuild or to let collapse. He looked at her that night, their children asleep upstairs, and whispered the only truth he had left. We're not broken yet, but we will be if we stop trying. And in her tear-streaked face, for the first time in months, he saw the faintest flicker of hope.